The ballroom at the Holloway Estate was dead silent. You could hear the champagne bubbles popping in the crystal flutes. Everyone was staring at the floor, terrified to look him in the eye. Kaelen Blackwood, the Alpha King, the man who had crushed the Northern Rebellion in a single night. He wasn't looking at the supermodels or the debutantes. He was walking straight toward the one girl trying to hide in the shadows, the girl with the scar down her neck and the stained apron. Her sister, the golden child, threw herself in front of him, sobbing. "Please, pick me. I'm the pretty one." "Don't look at her." Kaelen didn't even slow down. He stepped over the weeping beauty, grabbed the scarred girl by the chin, and said the 4 words that started the war. "I picked you, buckle up. This isn't a fairy tale. This is a hostage situation." The Holloway Estate, located just outside the damp, fog-covered town of Forks, Washington, smelled like old money and new desperation. Serafina Holloway, Sera to the few people who actually spoke to her, scrubbed the marble countertop until her knuckles turned white. The scent of lavender cleaning spray couldn't mask the underlying odor of the house: fear. Pure, unadulterated fear. "Stop cleaning, for God's sake, you look like the help," her father, Richard Holloway, hissed as he adjusted his cufflinks. His hands were shaking. "He will be here in 20 minutes, Serafina. 20 minutes. If this house isn't spotless, if your sister isn't perfection, the Blackwood pack calls in the debt." "Do you know what happens then?" Sera stopped scrubbing. She pushed a stray lock of dark hair behind her ear, her fingers brushing the raised, jagged scar that ran from her jawline down to her collarbone, a souvenir from a kitchen accident 10 years ago that nobody liked to talk about. "I know, Dad," Sera said, her voice raspy. "If he doesn't like the offering, he takes the land. We become rogues. He takes everything," Richard corrected, checking his reflection in the hallway mirror. He looked old. The alpha of the Holloway pack was a shadow of a man now, eaten alive by gambling debts, owed to the most dangerous predator on the West Coast. "Go check on Lillian. Ensure she is radiant." Sera wiped her hands on her jeans and headed up the grand staircase. The runner carpet was threadbare in the middle. They couldn't afford to replace it. She found Lillian in her bedroom, sitting at her vanity, staring blankly at her reflection. Lillian was everything Sera was not. Blonde, blue-eyed, with skin like porcelain and a wolf spirit that, while weak, settled comfortably in her soul. Sera's wolf had never surfaced. She was 23, wolfless, scarred and useful only for balancing the checkbook and keeping the house from falling down. "Lily?" Sera asked softly. Lillian jumped, spinning around. Her eyes were red-rimmed. "He's coming. The butcher is coming. Don't call him that," Sera said, closing the door and walking over to pick up a silver hairbrush. "His name is Kaelen Blackwood. And he's a king, Lily. You're going to be a queen. You'll be the most powerful woman in the state." "I don't want power," Lillian whispered, tears spilling over. I want to be free." Sera began brushing her sister's hair, the motion rhythmic and soothing. "Freedom is expensive, Lily. Dad spent hours. You have to do this. For the pack. For Dad, Lillian grabbed Sera's wrist, her grip surprisingly strong. You don't understand, Sera. If he chooses me, it's over. I can't go with him. Why? Sera frowned. Is it because of the stories? They say he's cold, sure. They say he killed his own uncle to take the throne. But he honors the old laws. He won't hurt a mate. Lillian looked down, her hand drifting to her stomach. The gesture was so subtle, so instinctive, that anyone else would have missed it. But Sera had raised Lillian since their mother died. She noticed everything. Sera froze. The air left the room. Lily, Sera whispered, her voice trembling. Tell me you aren't. Lillian began to sob, a wretched, broken sound. It was just one night. With that boy from the river pack. I didn't think, Sera, I missed my cycle. I'm 6 weeks late. Sera felt like the floor had opened up beneath her. The river pack were rivals to Blackwood. If Kaelen Blackwood, a man known for his obsession with bloodline purity and loyalty, found out the bride offered to settle a debt was carrying a rival's bastard, he wouldn't just take the land. He would execute Richard. He would execute Lillian. And he would burn the Holloway Estate to the ground. Does Dad know? Sera asked. No, Lillian choked out. He'd kill me himself before Blackwood got the chance. Sera's mind raced. She looked at her beautiful, terrified sister. Then she looked at herself in the mirror, the scar, the dull brown eyes, the oversized grey sweater that swallowed her thin frame. There was only one way out. Fix your face, Sera commanded, her voice turning into steel. What? Fix your face? Put on the dress. Walk downstairs. Do exactly as I say. Sera, what are you going to do? I'm going to make sure he doesn't pick you. The gravel of the driveway crunched under the weight of 4 matte black SUVs. It was raining, a relentless Seattle drizzle that turned the world grey. Sera stood in the back of the foyer, half hidden behind a potted fern. She had changed out of her cleaning clothes into a simple, severe black dress. It covered her neck, hiding the scar, but it did nothing to flatter her figure. She wore no makeup. She wanted to look invisible. Richard Holloway opened the double doors. The wind blew in, cold and sharp, smelling of ozone and pine. The car doors opened. 12 enforcers stepped out first. They were massive men, wearing tactical suits that barely concealed the lethal weaponry and the muscles underneath. They formed a perimeter. Then, from the second vehicle, he emerged. Kaelen Blackwood was taller than the photos in the newspapers suggested. He was over 6'4", with broad shoulders that strained against a tailored charcoal suit that probably cost more than the Holloway's mortgage. He didn't wear an overcoat. The rain hit his dark hair and seemed to slide off, repelled by the sheer heat radiating from him. His face was a collection of sharp angles, high cheekbones, a strong jaw shadowed by stubble, and eyes the color of shattered amber. He didn't look like a man. He looked like a natural disaster pausing for breath. He walked up the steps, his beater, a man named Sealers with a shaved head and a cruel smile trailing behind him. "Holloway," Kaelen said. His voice was a low rumble, like thunder in a canyon. He didn't offer a hand. "King Blackwood," Richard bowed low, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cold. "Welcome to our home. Please come in out of the rain." Kaelen stepped across the threshold. The atmosphere in the house changed instantly. The air grew heavy, charged with the alpha static that forced lesser wolves to bare their necks. Sera felt the pressure in her teeth, a vibration in her bones. Even without a wolf, her human instincts screamed, "Run." "We'll skip the pleasantries," Kaelen said, pulling off leather gloves. "I'm here for the payment." "Of course," Richard stammered. "Lillian." "Lillian, come down." At the top of the stairs, Lillian appeared. She was wearing a gown of pale blue silk. She looked like an angel. A terrified, trembling angel. She descended the stairs, her hand gripping the banister so hard her knuckles were white. Kaelen watched her come down. His expression was unreadable. He didn't smile. He didn't leer. He just observed. Like a wolf watching a deer graze. Lillian reached the bottom of the stairs and curtsied, her head bowed. "My lord," Richard beamed nervously. "My daughter, Lillian. She is the jewel of our pack. Pure bloodline. 19 years old. She has been prepared for this duty." Kaelen took a step toward her. Lillian flinched. It was a tiny movement, but Kaelen froze. He tilted his head. He took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of her. Sera's heart hammered against her ribs. He smells it. He smells the fear. Or worse, he smells the pregnancy. Kaelen frowned. He leaned in closer to Lillian. "You smell like lavender," he said, his voice flat. "And vomit," Lillian gasped. Richard went pale. "Nerves," Richard said quickly. "Just nerves, Your Majesty." Kaelen ignored him. He looked Lillian up and down, his eyes cold. "She is pretty," he acknowledged. "But she is fragile. I do not need a glass ornament, Holloway. I need a queen who can survive the North." This was it. Sera stepped out from behind the fern. "She's the best you'll ever get," Sera said, her voice loud in the silent hall. Every head turned. Richard looked horrified. "Serafina." "Get back to the kitchen." Kaelen turned slowly. His amber eyes locked onto Sera. For a second, the world stopped. Sera held his gaze. She didn't bow. She didn't look down. She clenched her fists at her sides. "My father offers you a prize poodle," Sera said, her chin lifted. "Take her and go. Leave the rest of us alone." Kaelen's eyes narrowed. He walked toward her. The crowd of enforcers parted for him. He moved with a predator's grace, silent and fluid. He stopped inches from her. He towered over her, his body heat radiating like a furnace. "And who are you?" he asked softly. The spare, Sera said. The mistake, Kaelen reached out. His hand, large and calloused, brushed her neck. He hooked a finger into the high collar of her dress and pulled it aside, revealing the jagged burn scar. Richard gasped. Your Majesty, forgive her, she is. Silence, Kaelen commanded, without looking away from Sera. He traced the scar with his thumb. His touch wasn't rough. It was curious. He leaned down, his nose grazing her jawline. He inhaled deeply. You don't smell like lavender, Kaelen murmured, his voice vibrating against her skin. You smell like rain. And irons. And rage, Sera trembled, but she didn't pull away. I'm not the one you want. Look at her, she pointed a shaking finger at Lillian. She's perfect. Lillian, sensing the shift, realizing her sister was antagonizing a monster to save her, threw herself forward. She grabbed Kaelen's arm. Pick my sister, Lillian cried out, tears streaming down her face. She's the smart one. But she's broken. Please pick me. I'm the pretty one. Look at me, it was a desperate backward plea. Lillian was trying to sell herself to save Sera, just as Sera was trying to provoke him to save Lillian. Kaelen looked at Lillian's hand on his arm with distaste. He gently but firmly removed her hand. Pick my sister, Lillian begged again, sobbing. She's not worthy of you, Kaelen turned back to Sera. He looked into her dull brown eyes and saw the fire burning behind them. He saw the way she stood between him and her sister. He saw the scar that she didn't try to hide from him. A slow, terrifying smile spread across Kaelen's face. You're right, Kaelen said to Lillian. She isn't the pretty one, he looked at Richard. The deal is struck. The debt is paid. Richard let out a breath of relief. Excellent. Lillian, go pack your... No, Kaelen said. The Alpha King grabbed Sera's wrist. He pulled her flush against his chest. The shock of his body against hers was electric. I didn't pick the ornament, Kaelen announced, his voice booming through the hall. He looked down at Sera, his eyes burning with a possessive, intense light. I picked the wolf in sheep's clothing. I picked you, what? Sera whispered, the blood draining from her face. No, you can't. I'm nobody. You are now mine, Kaelen said. He turned to his guards. Put her in the car. Wait, Sera screamed, struggling as two enforcers grabbed her arms. You don't understand. I can't provide heirs. I don't have a wolf. Kaelen paused at the door. He looked back over his shoulder, his silhouette framed by the rain. I didn't ask for a wolf, Serafina, he said darkly. I asked for a partner. And I think I just found the only person in this room with a spine. He walked out into the rain. Sera was dragged after him, kicking and screaming, leaving Lillian collapsing on the floor and her father staring in confused horror. The drive north took 4 hours. Sera spent the first hour calculating escape routes, and the next 3 in a sullen, terrified silence. She sat in the back of the SUV, separated from the driver by a partition. Kaelen sat next to her, reading documents on a tablet. He hadn't spoken a word, since they left the estate. He hadn't handcuffed her, but the lock on the door was engaged, and the car was moving at 80 miles an hour. Sera stared out the window as the landscape changed. The suburbs of Seattle gave way to the dense, towering pines of the Cascade foothills. The Blackwood territory. "You're thinking so loud it's giving me a headache," Kaelen said, not looking up from his tablet. Sera turned to him. "You made a mistake. I rarely make mistakes. And I never make them regarding business. I'm not business," she snapped. "I'm a person. And you took the wrong sister." Lillian was the one prepared for this. She knows the etiquette. She knows the history. "I know how to fix a leaky sink and balance a ledger." Kaelen finally set the tablet down. He turned his body toward her. In the confined space of the car, his size was overwhelming. His legs brushed against hers. "Why was she crying?" Kaelen asked. "Because she was terrified of you." "No," Kaelen corrected. "Via smells sour." She smelled like guilt. "What is she hiding, Serafina?" Sera's heart skipped a beat. She kept her face neutral. "Nothing." "She's just young." Kaelen studied her face. "You're lying. Your heart rate just jumped to 110. But I admire the loyalty. You were willing to throw yourself into the fire to keep her safe." "I am the fire," Sera muttered, more to herself than him. Kaelen chuckled. It was a dark, rich sound. "We'll see." The car slowed down. They passed through a massive iron gate flanked by guard towers. They wound up a steep mountain road until the trees broke, revealing the Blackwood stronghold. It wasn't a castle. It was a modern fortress of glass, steel, and black stone, built directly into the side of a cliff overlooking a raging river. It was beautiful, cold, and imposing. The cars stopped. Silas, the beater, opened the door. "Welcome home, little bird," Silas sneered. Kaelen shot Silas a look that could strip paint. "Beater, watch your tone. She is to be treated as the alpha female until I say otherwise." Silas bowed his head, chastised. "Yes, alpha." Kaelen stepped out and offered a hand to Sera. She ignored it and climbed out herself, her heels clicking on the pavement. "Where is the dungeon?" Sera asked, looking at the brutalist architecture. "Third floor, east wing," Kaelen said dryly. "But that's for rogues and traitors. You'll be in the master suite." He led her inside. The interior was minimalist luxury. High ceilings, abstract art, floor-to-ceiling windows. But it was empty. There were no photos. No personal touches. It felt like a hotel, not a home. They reached a set of double doors at the end of a long hallway. Kaelen pushed them open. The room was enormous. A king-sized bed sat on a platform. A fireplace roared on one wall. "This is your room," Kaelen said. "And mine," Sera spun around. "Yours." The contract said a marriage of alliance. It didn't say I had to. "Perform." Kaelen walked over to a wet bar and poured 2 fingers of amber liquid into a glass. He took a sip, watching her over the rim. The contract ensures my pack's borders are secure and your father's debts are wiped. The marriage makes it permanent. He walked toward her, setting the glass down. But I am not a rapist, Serafina. I don't touch what isn't offered. He stopped in front of her. However, you will sleep here. You will eat with me. You will attend council meetings with me. To the outside world, we are a united front. Inside this room, you can sleep on the couch if you wish. Sera eyed the plush velvet couch near the window. Fine, good. Kaelen began to unbutton his shirt. Sera turned around quickly. What are you doing? Changing. We have dinner with the elders in an hour. You need to look the part. I don't have any clothes, she said to the wall. The closet is full. My stylists have been working for weeks based on your sister's measurements. They might be a bit loose on you, but you'll make it work. Sera walked to the closet. She paused, her hand on the handle. Why me, Kaelen? She asked, using his name for the first time. Really? Why, behind her, she heard the rustle of fabric. Because, Kaelen said, his voice dropping to a whisper that seemed to curl around her ear. When I looked at your sister, I saw a victim. When I looked at you, I saw a survivor. And war is coming, Serafina. I need a survivor. Sera opened the closet. Inside hung rows of designer gowns, silk blouses, and cashmere coats. But buried in the back, she saw something else. A leather jacket. Combat boots. She realized then that Kaelen Blackwood had done his research. He hadn't just picked a sister at random. He had known exactly who she was. And that terrified her more than anything. The dining hall of the Obsidian Citadel was less of a place to eat and more of a courtroom where the sentence was always death. A long table made of ancient, petrified wood dominated the room. Seated around it were the 12 elders of the Blackwood pack, men and women with graying hair and eyes that had seen too much violence. They were the council that had helped Kaelen's father rule, and they were the ones who watched Kaelen like hawks, waiting for him to show a sign of weakness. Tonight, the weakness they were looking for was sitting at his right hand. Sera sat stiffly in the high-backed velvet chair. She wore a deep emerald gown Kaelen had selected. It was modest, with long sleeves and a high neck that concealed her scar, but the fabric clung to her in a way that made her feel exposed. She hadn't eaten a bite of the roasted venison on her plate. So began Elder Garrick, a man with a face like crumpled parchment and a voice like grinding stones. He didn't look at Kaelen, he stared directly at Sera. This is the Holloway contribution. The runt, the table went silent. Silverware clinked against china. Sera kept her chin up, though her hands were trembling in her lap. My name is Serafina. We know who you are, child, a woman named Beatrice sneered. She wore diamonds that caught the candlelight, but her smile was sharp enough to cut glass. You are the wolfless daughter of a gambling addict. We expected the blonde, the fertile one. Instead, our king brings home damaged goods. Kaelen, who had been lazily swirling his wine, stopped. The liquid in his glass settled instantly. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Careful, Beatrice," Kaelen said softly. "You are speaking about my mate. She is not your mate, Kaelen," Garrick snapped, slamming his hand on the table. "She is a debt payment. A placeholder until you find a suitable true mate. We need heirs, boy. Strong alpha bloodlines. Not this fragile, scarred human thing." Sera felt the sting of tears, but she bit the inside of her cheek until she tasted blood. She wouldn't cry. Not in front of them. She had spent 10 years being the disappointment of the Holloway pack. She was used to this. But Kaelen wasn't having it. "Fragile," Kaelen repeated the word as if tasting it. He turned his amber eyes to Sera. "Tell them, Serafina. Tell them what you found this morning." Sera blinked, surprised. "What, the ledgers?" Kaelen said, taking a sip of his wine. "You were bored while I was in meetings. You asked for something to read. I gave you the pack's financial reports from the northern mines. Tell Garrick what you found." Sera looked at Garrick. The old man's face paled slightly. Sera cleared her throat. She sat up straighter, her business mind taking over. The fear receded, replaced by the cold, hard logic of numbers. "The reports for the Silver Creek mine show a 14% decline in output over the last 3 quarters, Sera stated, her voice gaining strength. "However, the equipment maintenance costs for that same mine have risen by 20%. When I cross-referenced the vendor invoices, I noticed that the supplier for the new machinery is a shell company registered in Nevada." She paused, locking eyes with Garrick. "A shell company," Sera continued, "that lists Garrick's son, Liam, as the primary beneficiary. You aren't losing money, Elder Garrick. You're laundering it." Silence. Absolute, suffocating silence. Beatrice gasped. The other elders looked from Sera to Garrick with wide eyes. Garrick stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the stone floor. "You lying little, sit down," Kaelen commanded. He didn't shout. He didn't have to. The alpha command slammed into the room like a physical weight. Garrick collapsed back into his chair, wheezing. Kaelen stood up slowly. He walked behind Sera's chair and placed his hands on her shoulders. His grip was warm, solid, and terrifyingly possessive. "You see," Kaelen said to the room, his voice a low growl. "I didn't bring home a broodmare. I have enough wolves to fight. I have enough enforcers to kill. What I need is someone who sees the things I miss. I need a queen who is smarter than the snakes trying to bite her ankles." He leaned down, his lips brushing Sera's ear. "And she is beautiful, Garrick. Including the scar." With a swift motion, Kaelen unzipped the back of Sera's dress just enough to loosen the high collar. He pulled the fabric aside, exposing the jagged, silvery burn mark on her neck. Sera froze. She wanted to cover it, to hide the ugly truth of her past, but Kaelen's hand kept her still. "Look at it," Kaelen ordered the table. "This isn't a defect. It's a badge of survival. Anyone who insults my queen again will answer to me. And the next time, I won't use words. He looked at Garrick. You have until dawn to return the funds, or I will let Serafina decide your punishment. Kaelen pulled Sera's collar back up, his fingers lingering on her skin for a second too long. Dinner is over. Come, Serafina, he offered her his hand. For the first time in her life, Sera didn't feel like the broken sister. She didn't feel like the ugly one. As she placed her hand in Kaelen's, she felt something dangerous and intoxicating. She felt powerful. 3 weeks passed. The master suite arrangement had settled into a strange, tense routine. They slept in the same bed, king-sized, with a distinct gap between them that felt like a canyon, but they didn't touch. Yet the intimacy was growing in other ways. They argued over politics at breakfast. They worked side by side in Kaelen's study in the evenings. Sera organized his chaotic filing system. Kaelen taught her how to read the tactical maps of the territory. Sera was starting to see the man beneath the monster. Kaelen was exhausted. He carried the weight of 3,000 wolves on his shoulders. He was ruthless because he had to be, but he wasn't cruel without cause. But the peace couldn't last. It was a Tuesday, raining as always. Kaelen was away at the border dealing with a rogue incursion. Sera was alone in the library, a massive 2-story room filled with books older than the country itself. She was looking for a specific volume on pack law regarding mated humans, trying to understand her rights if Kaelen ever decided to annul the union. She climbed the rolling ladder to the top shelf. As she pulled out a heavy, leather-bound tome, a small, black notebook fell out from behind it and tumbled to the floor. Sera climbed down and picked it up. It was old, the leather cracked. Embossed on the cover were the initials R.H. her father. Richard Holloway. Frowning, Sera opened it. It was a journal. The dates were from 20 years ago. June 4th. The deal is done. The witch demanded a high price, but it is the only way to save the pack. Lillian will be the vessel. Serafina must be the anchor. July 10th. It worked. Lillian's wolf is bright, golden, perfect. But Serafina, the child, screams in the night. The shadows move around her crib. What have I done? August 15th. I had to bind it. I had to burn the mark into her to seal the darkness away. She will hate me. She will never know her own powers. If she ever wakes up, if the seal breaks, she will destroy us all. Sera dropped the book. Her hands were shaking so hard she could barely breathe. The anchor, she whispered. The seal, her hand flew to her scar. Her father had always told her she spilled boiling water on herself when she was 3. He said it was an accident. I had to burn the mark into her. A wave of nausea hit her. He had done this. Her father had branded her. And Lillian was the vessel. Finding some light reading, Sera spun around, gasping. Standing in the doorway was not Kaelen. It was a woman Sera had never seen before. She was tall, with fiery red hair and eyes that glowed with a faint, unnatural green light. She wore the uniform of a Blackwood servant, but she held herself like a warrior. "Who are you?" Sera demanded, trying to hide the notebook behind her back. "My name is Nyx," the woman said, stepping into the room. "And you, Serafina, are a very difficult person to kill." Sera backed up until she hit the desk. "What are you talking about?" "The poison," Nyx said casually, inspecting her fingernails. "I've been slipping monkshood into your tea for a week. A normal human would be dead. A normal wolf would be convulsing. You just look a little pale." Sera's blood ran cold. The headaches, the nausea she'd felt for days. She thought it was stress. "Why?" Sera whispered. "Because Kaelen is getting too attached," Nyx said, her voice dropping. "He was supposed to kill you and take the land. That was the plan. But now, he's listening to you. He's respecting you. And that ruins everything for my employer." "Who is your employer?" Nyx smiled, revealing teeth that were too sharp. "Someone who wants the king dead. And the best way to break a king is to break his favorite toy." Nyx lunged. She moved with supernatural speed. Sera didn't have time to scream. Nyx's hand clamped around her throat, slamming her back onto the desk. Sera clawed at the woman's hands, but it was like fighting a statue. Black spots danced in her vision. "Don't worry," Nyx hissed. "I'll make it look like a suicide." The poor, broken girl couldn't handle the pressure. Sera's lungs burned. She was dying. She was going to die here, in this library, and Kaelen would never know the truth. "No!" A surge of heat erupted in Sera's chest. It wasn't the heat of a wolf. It was something older. Something colder. The scar on her neck began to throb. It felt like it was splitting open. "I am not a victim," Sera thought, the rage boiling over. "I am the survivor." Sera's eyes flew open. But instead of brown, they flashed a blinding, electric violet. A shockwave of pure energy blasted outward from her body. Boom! The library windows shattered. Books flew off the shelves. Nyx screamed as she was thrown backward, flying across the room and smashing through the heavy oak door. Sera collapsed to the floor, gasping for air. The violet light faded from her eyes, leaving her trembling and terrified. Silence returned to the room, broken only by the sound of rain blowing in through the broken windows. Heavy footsteps pounded down the hallway. "Serafina!" Kaelen burst into the room, his clothes soaked with rain, his face wild with panic. He saw the destruction. He saw the unconscious assassin in the hall. He saw Sera huddled on the floor. He was at her side in a second, pulling her into his arms. "Sera, are you hurt?" "What happened?" Sera looked up at him. She was shivering violently. She touched her neck. The scar was hot to the touch. She couldn't tell him. If she told him about the book, about the darkness, he might kill her. He was an alpha. He destroyed threats. And according to her father, she was the threat. She attacked me, Sera whispered, burying her face in his wet shirt. I hit her with a heavy book. She fell. Kaelen looked at the devastation in the room. He looked at the unconscious woman, Nyx, who looked like she'd been hit by a truck, not a book. He looked back at Sera, his eyes narrowing. He knew she was lying. But he didn't push. Instead, he pulled her closer, wrapping his jacket around her. Sealers, Kaelen roared, his voice shaking the walls. The beater appeared in the doorway, looking stunned. Take that traitor to the cells, Kaelen ordered, gesturing to Nyx. And find out who sent her. Peel the skin off her bones if you have to. I want a name. Kaelen scooped Sera up into his arms as if she weighed nothing. I've got you, he whispered into her hair. You're safe. Sera rested her head against his shoulder, listening to the steady, powerful beat of his heart. She was safe from the assassin, yes. But as she clutched the small black notebook hidden in her dress pocket, she knew the real danger was just beginning. Kaelen had fallen for the survivor. But would he still love the monster? As they walked out, Sera looked over Kaelen's shoulder. In the shadows of the hallway, she saw something. Or someone. A figure stood there, watching. It was a woman with blonde hair and a pale blue dress. Lillian. But Lillian was supposed to be hundreds of miles away at the Holloway Estate. The figure smiled, a cold, knowing smile, and then vanished into the dark. The dungeon smelled of rust and bleach. Kaelen stood in the shadows, his arms crossed, watching Sela's work. The beater wasn't using tools, he was using pressure points. It was cleaner, but infinitely more painful. Nyx, the red-haired assassin, was strapped to a steel chair. She was battered, but her defiance was still intact. Sera stood behind the one-way glass in the observation room, watching. She clutched the black journal to her chest. She had told Kaelen about the book. She had too. If there was a traitor in the midst, secrets were a liability. Who sent you? Kaelen's voice boomed through the speaker system. Nyx spat blood onto the concrete floor. I told you. A ghost, Kaelen signaled sealers. The beater pressed a thumb into a nerve cluster at the base of Nyx's neck. She screamed, a sound that made Sera flinch. Stop, Sera shouted, hitting the intercom button. Let me talk to her, Kaelen looked at the glass. He hesitated, then nodded. Sera walked into the interrogation room. The air was thick with the scent of fear and ozone. She walked up to Nyx, ignoring Kaelen's warning growl. You said a ghost, Sera said softly. You saw her in the hallway, didn't you? The girl in the blue dress, Nyx's eyes widened. The bravado slipped. She wasn't supposed to be there. She paid me through a proxy. Said she wanted the usurper gone. Who? Kaelen stepped into the light, his amber eyes glowing. Who paid you? Nyx looked at Sera, then at Kaelen. Lillian Holloway, the name hung in the air like smoke. That's impossible, Kaelen said immediately. Lillian is in Forks. She's a weak, pregnant girl. She doesn't have the contacts or the money to hire a mercenary like you. She isn't pregnant, Nix rasped, laughing painfully. And she isn't weak. She's a siren, you idiot alpha. She's been siphoning power from her sister for 20 years. Sera felt the room spin. Siphoning. She opened the journal to the last page. She hadn't shown Kaelen this part yet because she hadn't understood it. October 31st. The binding is failing. Seraphina's power is too great. It's leaking into Lillian. Lillian likes the taste of it. She is encouraging the abuse. She wants Sera broken because when Sera breaks, Lillian feeds. Sera dropped the book. It wasn't a debt, Sera whispered, the horror dawning on her. My father didn't sell me to pay a gambling debt. He sold me to you because I was becoming too dangerous to keep, and Lillian was done feeding. Kaelen looked at the journal, then at Sera. The pieces clicked into place. The vomit smell on Lillian wasn't morning sickness. It was the rot of dark magic. The rage he smelled on Sera wasn't just anger, it was suppressed power. Sealers, Kaelen ordered, his voice deadly calm. Prepare the convoy. We're going back to the Holloway Estate. How many men? Sealers asked. All of them, Kaelen said. We aren't going to negotiate. We are going to war. The drive back to Forks was silent, but it wasn't the fearful silence of the first trip. It was the silence of a hurricane gathering strength. Kaelen sat next to Sera, his hand covering hers. He was tracing the lines of her palm, grounding her. If she is a siren, Kaelen said quietly, she can control minds. She can make men see what they want to see. That's why your father acted the way he did. She's been puppeteering him, and the pregnancy, Sera asked. A lie. To make her seem vulnerable. To make me reject her, Kaelen's jaw tightened. She wanted me to pick you. She knew I would sense the power in you and take you away. She wanted you out of the house so she could consolidate the territory without your accidental magic interfering. But why hire an assassin now? Because I didn't kill you, Kaelen said, looking at her with an intensity that burned. I empowered you. You stopped being a battery and started being a queen. That threatens her, the convoy screeched to a halt. They were at the gates of the Holloway Estate. But it didn't look like a home anymore. The windows were boarded up. Strange purple symbols were painted on the brickwork. The sky above the house swirled with unnatural storm clouds, green lightning flickering within them. And standing on the front porch, wearing a dress made of black feathers and looking nothing like the weeping girl from weeks ago, was Lillian. She was flanked by Richard Holloway, who looked gaunt and grey, his eyes completely white. He was a husk. Welcome back, sister, Lillian's voice amplified across the lawn, echoing with a distortion that grated on the ears. Did you bring my husband? Kaelen stepped out of the SUV. He didn't shift into his wolf form yet. He just buttoned his jacket and walked toward the gate. I am not your husband, witch, Kaelen roared. Technically, Lillian smiled, and it was a grotesque thing. You signed the contract with the Holloway line. I am the Holloway line. Sera is just the spare parts. She raised her hand. The ground shook. From the woods surrounding the estate, wolves emerged. But they weren't normal wolves. They were the river pack, Kaelen's rivals, but their fur was matted, their eyes glowing that same sick green. They were being controlled. Kill him, Lillian commanded boredly. Keep the girl alive. I need her heart, 50 wolves charged. Kaelen ripped his shirt off, his body contorting. Bones cracking. In seconds, a massive midnight black wolf stood in his place. He threw his head back and howled, a sound of pure, ancient defiance. The Blackwood enforcers shifted behind him. The battle was joined. Sera stood by the car. She had no wolf. She had no weapon. Sera, stay in the car, sealers shouted, firing a shotgun at a leaping river wolf. No, Sera whispered. She looked at her sister. Lillian was laughing, watching the slaughter. She was feeding on the violence. Sera felt the heat in her chest again. The scar on her neck burned like a branding iron. I am the survivor. Sera started walking toward the house. Sera, Kaelen's wolf snarled, tackling a grey wolf midair and tearing its throat out. He tried to turn back to her, but 3 more wolves jumped on his back. Sera kept walking. The chaos parted around her. A river wolf lunged at her, jaws snapping. Sera didn't flinch. She just looked at it. Sit, she commanded. Her voice wasn't raspy. It was layered, resonant, sounding like a choir of voices. The wolf whimpered and dropped to its belly, whining. Lillian stopped laughing. She stared at Sera. How you took everything from me, Sera said, her voice continuing to rise in volume. My childhood. My confidence. My father. She reached the porch steps. Richard Holloway stumbled forward, blocking her path. Sera. Run. He croaked, fighting the control. Tears leaked from his white eyes. She's too strong. I'm sorry, Daddy, Sera said softly. She placed her hand on Richard's chest. A pulse of violet light left her palm. Richard gasped, his eyes clearing for 1 second. He smiled. Then he collapsed, his heart stopped by the mercy of death, freeing him from the puppet strings. Lillian screamed. It was a banshee shriek that shattered the windows of the SUVs. You ungrateful little brat, Lillian raised both hands. Green fire erupted from the ground, circling Sera. I made you. You were nothing. I let you live so I could feed on your misery. I am not your food, Sera said. She reached up and touched the scar on her neck. It was time. She dug her nails into the scar tissue. It hurt. It hurt more than anything she had ever felt. But she pulled. With a wet, tearing sound, she ripped the magical seal, the physical scar, from her skin. The explosion of energy knocked every wolf on the battlefield off their feet. Kaelen was thrown into the side of the house. He shook his massive head, dazed. Where Serafina had stood, there was now a pillar of blinding, violet light. The light began to take shape. It didn't form a human. It didn't form a wolf. It formed a creature of pure energy, a spectral, towering entity that looked like a wolf, made of starlight and void. It was an Alpha Prime spirit, a legend that hadn't been seen in 1,000 years. The spirit Sera opened its jaws and roared. It wasn't a sound, it was a vibration that shattered the green lightning in the sky. Lillian looked up, her face twisted in true terror for the first time. No. Dad said he killed it. He said he killed the Prime. The spirit Sera lunged. Lillian tried to throw a shield of green fire, but the spirit walked right through it. The massive paw of the violet entity pinned Lillian to the porch. The connection to the river pack wolves snapped. Released from the mind control, the rival wolves looked around, confused and terrified. Seeing the Blackwood pack and the god monster on the porch, they turned and fled into the woods. The battle was over. The judgment had begun. The violet light began to recede, condensing back into the form of a woman. Sera stood over her sister. Her clothes were tattered, her hair floating as if underwater. Her eyes were solid, glowing purple. The scar on her neck was gone, replaced by smooth, unblemished skin. Lillian lay broken on the wood, her magic stripped away by the sheer proximity of a prime. As she looked small, pathetic. Sera, Lillian wept, reaching out a hand. Please. We are sisters. I did it for us. We can rule together. You have the power, I have the vision. Sera looked down at her. She felt the rage of 10 years of abuse. She felt the urge to crush Lillian, to end her. Then she felt a warm, heavy weight against her side. Kaelen. He had shifted back to human form. He was naked, covered in blood and mud, but he didn't care. He wrapped his arms around Sera's waist, burying his face in her neck. Easy, my love, Kaelen whispered. Easy. You've won. Don't let her turn you into a monster. That's what she wants. Sera took a deep breath. The violet glow in her eyes faded to a warm, rich brown. She leaned back into Kaelen, her legs giving out. He caught her, holding her tight. You're right, Sera whispered. She looked at Silas, who was limping up the driveway. Take her, Sera ordered, pointing at Lillian. Drive her to the border of the rogue lands. Strip her of her name. Strip her of her status. If she steps foot in Blackwood or Holloway territory again, kill her, Lillian screamed as the enforcers dragged her away. You can't do this. I'm the queen. I'm the pretty one. No, Sera said, turning her back on her sister. You're just a memory 6 months later. The winter snow had melted, revealing the lush green of the Blackwood Mountains. The citadel had changed. There were flowers in the vases. Now, the heavy curtains were pulled back to let the sun in. And the council table had a few new faces, younger, progressive wolves who respected results, not just bloodlines. Sera sat on the balcony railing, looking out over the valley. She wore a simple white shirt and jeans, her feet bare. She didn't hide in the shadows anymore. "You're brooding," Kaelen's voice came from behind her. He stepped out, placing 2 mugs of coffee on the small table. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "I'm not brooding," Sera smiled, leaning into him. "I'm thinking about what? About the wedding," Kaelen groaned. "I told you we can elope. I don't need a ceremony. I have you. The pack knows who their queen is. They saw you dismantle a siren with your bare hands. My father's debts are paid," Sera said quietly. "The Holloway land is healing. But people still talk. They say I trapped you. That I used magic to make you pick me." Kaelen turned her around. He lifted her chin, forcing her to look into his amber eyes. "Let them talk," Kaelen said fiercely. "Let them say I was bewitched. Let them say I was tricked. I don't care." He kissed her, a slow, deep kiss that tasted of coffee and promise. "When I walked into that ballroom," Kaelen whispered against her lips, "I didn't pick the magic. I didn't pick the prime. I picked the girl who was brave enough to stand in the rain and tell a king to go to hell." Sera laughed, tracing the line of his jaw. "I didn't tell you to go to hell. You were thinking it, maybe a little," Kaelen smiled. "I love you, Serafina. My equal. My anchor. I love you, Kaelen." "My king." Below them in the valley, a wolf howled, a joyous, welcoming sound. It was joined by another, then another, until the whole mountain was singing. It wasn't a song of war. It was a song of home. And that, my friends, is how the ugly sister became the alpha queen of the West Coast. It turns out the most dangerous thing you can do is underestimate the quiet ones. Lillian is still out there, somewhere in the rogue lands, probably complaining about the lack of room service. But Serafina, she proved that power isn't about being pretty. It's about surviving the fire and coming out as gold. If you enjoyed this story, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss the next part of our alpha romance saga. What do you think? Did Lillian deserve a harsher punishment? Or was exile the perfect revenge? Let me know in the comments below. Until next time, keep howling.